Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino and also welcome back to a brand new season of World of Tanks console. In today's video I'll be giving you a full review of the Ultimate Season Pass tank for the brand new Soldiers of Fortune season, and if we scroll on down here we'll see what that vehicle is. The vehicle in question is the Ruthless, which is a tier 10 mercenary tank destroyer, and what a behemoth it looks like it's going to be on the battlefield. It's the hull of the tier 8 Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the TNH 105-1000, the turret of a T124 tier 10 American tank destroyer, and the gun of the FV215B183, the Death Star, or the FV4005 Stage 2, a 183mm caliber gun, so be prepared for lots of derping on the battlefield. We're going to be heading over to Excel in just a second, having a look at the stats of the Ruthless, and we're going to be comparing to a lot of tier 10 tank destroyers in today's review. We're going to be first comparing it to the FV4005 and the Death Star, as they do have slightly different characteristics, and then we'll be comparing to the tier 10 German tank destroyers, the Sturm Tiger with that 380mm caliber gun, and also the Jagdpanzer E100 with that infamous 170mm caliber gun. I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup. I'll show you the armor profile of this vehicle in the garage, and then we'll take it onto the battlefield and we'll see how this tank performs on the battlefield with some gameplay at the end of this video. So, as it is a premium vehicle, it earns a 5% XP boost, and the other tanks in this comparison are just tech tree tanks. They don't have any bonuses whatsoever. In terms of the colour coding with my reviews, if you haven't seen them before, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, with yellow being the stats with my commander and equipment setup applied to the base stats of the vehicle. We're going to start by having a look at the hit points then. 2,000 hit points on the Ruthless, which is the same as the Death Star, 50 more than the FV4005, so a nice healthy slug of hit points for a tier 10 tank destroyer. And yeah, you're definitely going to be needing those hit points as we get on into the armor profile. We're going to see a little bit later on. Strong turret, but the hull isn't going to be as strong as it is a tier 8 hull. However, you do have enough hit points to be able to take a few shots, but just not a few shots from some of the tanks in this comparison. In terms of the view range, 380 meters, which is 10 less than the Death Star and the FV4005, but you can get that up to a respectable level with a good commander and equipment setup. And now we're going to get onto the mobility, and as you can see, a lot of it's highlighted in red, which is disappointing news for the Ruthless. You have a 750 horsepower engine with a god-awful power-to-weight ratio of 11.79. You have a 200 horsepower less than the FV4005 and even 50 less than the Death Star. You have an awful power-to-weight compared to the FV4005, and it's even worse, quite substantially, than the Death Star, so very, very sluggish, hard to get up hills, and hard to even get up to your top forward speed. Your top forward speed itself is 38 kilometers an hour, which is the joint best in this comparison with the FV4005, but that tank can actually reach the top speed more often than not, whereas the Ruthless does even struggle, as you're going to see in the gameplay, to reach that top speed, especially when there's even the smallest of inclines. In terms of your reverse speed, 12 kilometers an hour backwards, and that's very awkward considering you only have 90 degrees to the left and right turret traverse. 12 degrees, or 12 kilometers an hour, I should say, in reverse is the same as the Death Star and worse than the FV4005. In terms of the whole traverse, 28 degrees a second, again, worst in this comparison, worse than the FV4005 and a lot worse than the Death Star. So you're very slow to move your hull around, very slow to get up to your top speed, if at all, and very slow backwards. Your turret traverse, however, is the joint best in this comparison, but that's because they all have the same figure, 16 degrees a second, and that is still pretty damn slow at getting your turret and your gun around on your enemy, and gun handling skills will improve that, and you're going to want to do everything you can to improve this 183mm caliber gun, as we're going to get on to talking about the firepower of the Ruthless now. So all three Tanks in this comparison have the 183mm caliber gun, very large caliber gun, good for ammo racks, good for module damage and setting people on fire, as well as just blapping them for half, 3/4 and sometimes all of their hit points. You have 3 flavours of ammunition with the Ruthless. You do have AP rounds as standard, and then you do have 2 HE rounds, whereas the FE4005 and the Death Star have designated HESH, but it's essentially the same thing, high penetration HE rounds. In terms of the shell velocity, all 3 of these guns have the same shell velocity on all of the rounds, 830 meters a second, and for a high caliber gun, that's not ridiculously slow, but you do have to give a little bit more lead than you would in sort of guns on medium tanks and things like that, so definitely take that into consideration. In terms of the penetration, the only thing that's different with this gun in terms of the Death Star and the FE4005 is that you have 230mm of premium HE penetration or HESH penetration, whereas the Death Star and FE4005 have 240mm, so that's a bad point for the Ruthless. You have 310mm of standard AP penetration and 92mm of standard HE penetration. In terms of the alpha damages, the same on all of these guns, 1150 with those AP rounds, 1450 if you penetrate those premium HE rounds or HESH rounds, and if you penetrate with the 92mm of penetration on the regular HE, you'll be dealing 1650 damage. And I've also included the stats here for the splash radius and also the module damage. So splash radius, how much your HE splashes around where the shell hits. So in all these vehicles, it's 5.05 meters. So good for splashing low health targets and killing them with the HESH or with the regular HE. And in terms of the module damage, all 3 of these shells on all of the guns have the same module damage, 244. Like I said, great for setting people on fire, dealing internal module damage, killing crew members, things like that. And you do get a nice lot of ammo racks as well with this gun. So yeah, a little bit disappointing there in terms of the premium HESH being a little bit worse. However, they have to try and balance it out somehow, although it can be very difficult with the kind of alpha damages that are going around. But now we're going to get onto the gun handling and DPM, and this is where it differs quite significantly from the FE4005 and from the Death Star. So starting with the aim time, you can see 3.1 seconds, the worst in this comparison by a long, long way. And you also have the worst accuracy in this comparison at 0.4, much worse than the FE4005, and also worse than the Death Star. In terms of your rate of fire, again, it's bad news, 1.82 rounds a minute, much worse than the FE4005 and the Death Star, which means that you reload for one shell in 33 seconds, whereas the FE4005 reloads in 27 seconds and the Death Star in 28 seconds, which means you do have a very poor DPM of 2093, and this is if you are firing the AP rounds. The Death Star has 2,461 and the FE4005 comes out on top at 2,553, so not a DPM monster by any means. However, if you do hit and you penetrate your shells, you're still going to be dealing substantial damage in your gameplay. And bear in mind, there are armor differences. Of course, the FE4005 has a 15mm turret, which can be penetrated by HE, and the Death Star does have some turret armor and hull armor, and the Ruthless just basically has turret armor, as we're going to get onto in just a second. In terms of the ammo capacity, the same for all 3 of these guns and tanks, 20 rounds. 6 degrees of gun depression on the Ruthless. It's slightly better than the 5 degrees on the Death Star, but not as good as the FE4005's 10 degrees, but you can still make that work on sort of 50% of the ridgelines you're going to be coming into contact with on the battlefield. You do have 15 degrees of gun elevation, the joint best with the Death Star at 15 degrees, and better than the FE4005's 8 degrees. And in terms of the yaw limit, so how far your turret goes to the left and right, 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, same as the FE4005, and twice as good as the Death Star, which is limited to 45 degrees to the left and 45 degrees to the right. What we're going to do now is go over to sheet 2, have a look at the stats of the Ruthless compared to the Sturmtiger and the Jagdpanzer E100, as they are very comparable in terms of their high caliber guns, high alpha damage, and then we're going to have a look at my commander and equipment setup. So we'll forget that 5% XP bonus, we'll get stuck straight into the hit points, and as you can see, Ruthless in terms of these 3 tanks, worst in this comparison, 200 hit points less than the Sturmtiger and the Jagdpanzer E100, and both of those tanks have far superior armour. In terms of view range, 10 meters short of the Sturmtiger and Jagdpanzer E100. Mobility wise, and this is going to come as a little bit of a shock, it's a lot worse than the Sturmtiger. You can see worse engine power, worse power to weight, same top forward speed, and you do have a worse reverse speed. The exact same hold reverse as the Sturmtiger, so if you've played that tank, you know what it is like to turn the whole of the Ruthless. And your turret reverse, again, worse in this comparison, much worse at getting your gun around onto your targets. In terms of the Jagdpanzer E100's mobility, far superior engine power, but you're a super heavy tank destroyer. You've got the worst in class power to weight and the worst in class top forward speed, as well as hold reverse, but it kind of is comparable to the Ruthless. So if you played the Jagdpanzer E100, you're only going to be slightly more mobile than the Jagdpanzer E100 and slower than the Sturmtiger, so definitely take that into consideration. In terms of the firepower then, 183mm caliber gun, as we've discussed on the Ruthless. The Sturmtiger has a 38cm or 380mm caliber gun, and the Jagdpanzer E100, the lowest in this comparison, 170mm or 17cm. So we've discussed the Ruthless's gun, its penetration and its alpha damage. How about the other 2 tanks? Well, the Sturmtiger has heat as its standard ammunition, premium HE secondary and regular HE as third, and the Jagdpanzer E100 a little bit more of a normal kind of setup that you'll see on a lot of tanks, AP as standard, heat as premium, and HE as its third ammunition selection. So in terms of your shell velocity, you can see the Jagdpanzer E100 will come out on top with better shell velocity, better for sniping at mid to long ranges, and you also have those heat rounds with fantastic penetration, 420mm, much easier for a sort of less experienced player of weak spots to be able to penetrate enemy tanks, and you do have that 299mm of standard penetration, which is fantastic and only a little bit behind the 310mm of the Ruthless. However, the Ruthless does have better than the Sturmtiger's heat rounds, which has 280mm of penetration. In terms of the premium rounds then, of course, the Jagdpanzer E100 comes out on top in terms of shell velocity and penetration. Alpha damage king is the Sturmtiger, higher caliber gun, higher alpha damage, that makes complete sense. It's got 1700 on its premium rounds, 1300 on its standard, and 1700 on its regular HE as well. In terms of the shell velocity on the Sturmtiger, being a really high caliber gun, it's even more derpy. Essentially, you've got over twice worse shell velocity than you do on the Ruthless. So if you hate slow shell velocity, the Sturmtiger is going to be a tank that you probably won't get on with. In terms of the splash damage, you can see here that the Ruthless has 5.05 on its premium HE and the Sturmtiger 12.9, so better at splashing multiple targets, the Sturmtiger, but you can still splash quite a wide area with the Ruthless's HE. And in terms of the regular HE, 5.05 on the Ruthless and 9 on the Sturmtiger, so again, that tank comes out on top, and the HE on the Jagdpanzer only slightly worse than the splash radius on the Ruthless. And module damage, as you can see here, Sturmtiger is going to come out on top if you penetrate with the poorer penetration that that vehicle has compared to the other tanks in this comparison. The only thing that it comes out on top of in terms of penetration is better third HE round or standard HE round at 115mm, but it does have 295 module damage on each of the rounds. The Ruthless 244 and the Jagdpanzer E100 slightly behind that at 228, but yeah, not too far behind the Ruthless considering it is 13mm caliber gun, lower than the Ruthless. In terms of the gun handling then of all of these tanks, you can see here that the Ruthless in terms of the aim time is somewhere in the middle. Not quite as bad as the Sturmtiger, but almost as bad, and considering that it's a 183 and not a 380mm caliber gun, it's really disappointing for the Ruthless there. Jagdpanzer E100 coming out on top in terms of the aim time. The Jagdpanzer E100 also coming out on top in terms of the accuracy, 0.35. It makes sense as it's the lower caliber gun in this comparison, but still a massive gun. And again, the Ruthless only a smidgen behind the Sturmtiger, and considering, like I just said, it's a lower caliber gun than the Sturmtiger, it's really disappointing gun handling for the Ruthless. In terms of rate of fire, the Ruthless comes out at the bottom 1.82, where the Jagdpanzer E100 comes out on top at 2.33. You reload for one shell in the Ruthless in 33 seconds, 31 seconds with the Sturmtiger, and 25.7 seconds with the Jagdpanzer E100. In terms of the DPM, what that equates to if you're firing your standard rounds, 2093 with the Ruthless, 2522 with the Sturmtiger's Heat. If you penetrate, that is the best DPM. And the Jagdpanzer E100 with a respectable 2,446. Ammo capacity wise, Ruthless in the middle, 2 more than the 18 on the Sturmtiger, but 4 less than the Jagdpanzer E100. Gun depression, best in this comparison, joint with the Jagdpanzer E100, 2 degrees better than the 4 degrees on the Sturmtiger. And in terms of the gun elevation, you have the worst in this comparison, 2 behind the 17 degrees of gun elevation on the Jagdpanzer E100. And the Sturmtiger has an astronomical 85 degrees of gun elevation. Lastly, the yaw limit, so how far does your turret turn to the left and to the right, or does it go all the way around? Ruthless, 90 degrees to the left and to the right. Sturmtiger can only move its gun 10 degrees to the left and to the right. And Jagdpanzer E100 on bottom, 8 degrees to the left, 8 degrees to the right. So more flexible is the Ruthless in terms of this comparison. But what can you take home from this particular comparison with the Sturmtiger and Jagdpanzer E100? Well, if you hate derpy guns with slow shell velocity, poor penetration, and you just like splashing things for a laugh, Sturmtiger is your man. Jagdpanzer E100 for the sort of more serious player, better penetration, better shell velocity, and you do have still a decent damage with module damage and also good splash damage on your HE with far superior gun handling and a good DPM. However, Ruthless, a little bit more flexible on the battlefield, some pretty decent gun depression. You still have great penetration in your standard rounds, a little bit disappointed on your premium Hesh rounds. Good splash, good module damage, very, very poor mobility, worse than the Sturmtiger, and yeah, comparable to the Jagdpanzer E100, only a little bit better, and yeah, worse hit points, worse view range, so it's not looking too great for the Ruthless, but we'll have to see how that actually translates to on the battlefield and see how powerful this tank is, and we all know how good the T110E4's turret is, so we'll have to see how the armour is on the Ruthless. So that's it for the stats comparison there of the Ruthless. I'm now going to tell you my commander and equipment setup, and then I'll show you how that affects the stats of the Ruthless. Then I'll take you to the garage, show you the armour profile of the Ruthless, and then we'll get stuck into the first of the gameplays. So in terms of my equipment, what I've chosen to run is Advanced Optics, Advanced Loader, and the Advanced Reload skill, which helps you swap non-ATGM ammo freely, so without time penalty, so you can switch between your AP, Premium HE, or regular HE. And in terms of the commander skills, I've chosen to run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Clutch Break-In, Situational Awareness, and Track Mechanics. So Sixth Sense and Born Leader as standard on all of my commanders, Rapid Loading to help that very, very bad DPM. Then under free gun handling skills to be able to help the Ruthless out. I've not put in Run and Gun because I'm not going to be firing this on the move because it's absolutely horrific. Clutch Break-In to help me get my hull around to my opponents and help me get tanks that are trying to circle strafe me. Situational Awareness to further improve my view range because it's poorer than the other vehicles. And Track Mechanic because there's no hull armor and I want to be able to get into safety if I get tracked out in the open. So what has that done to the stats of the Ruthless? In terms of my view range, boosted it up from 380 to 486 meters, which is respectable for a tier 10 tank destroyer. In terms of my mobility, I haven't obviously used the traction system or advanced powertrain because I've just invested in gun handling and trying to improve the DPM and view range. So my hold reverse has improved to 30.52 degrees a second with the help of Clutch Break-In, and turret traverse is improved with the gun handling skills from 16 to 19.46 degrees a second, so still slow but a lot better at trying to get my hull and gun around on my targets. And lastly, in terms of the gun handling, aim times dropped from 3.1 to 2.85 seconds, which is still, even more than the base value on the Death Star and the FE 4005. In terms of the accuracy, dropped from 0.4 to 0.32, so still inaccurate as hell for the current meta of World of Tanks console. Rate of fire improved from 1.82 to 2.49, which means I now reload instead of 33 seconds base in 24.07 seconds. And lastly, that means my DPM's gone from 2093 to 2864, which is, a massive change, and it will help this vehicle out, considering you don't have any hull armor, as we're going to see. You don't have the best mobility, so you're going to try and want to make every shot count and get as much out of this gun as possible, because that is the strong point of this vehicle, barring the turret armor. So that's it for the comparison of the Ruthless and the stats of the Ruthless. We're now going to head on over to the garage, have a look at the armor profile of this vehicle, and then we're going to get stuck into the first of the gameplay. So I'll see you over in the garage in just a second. So we are in the garage and we're going to have a look at the armor viewer of the Ruthless. We're going to go from the thickest part of the armor down to the thinnest and see what is good about the armor and what isn't so good. So like I said at the start of today's video, the Ruthless is a mercenary tank comprised of 3 elements: the hull of the Tier 8 Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the TNH 105-1000, the turret of the T110E4 with some minor changes from the Tech Tree tank, and the gun of the Death Star or the FE 4005. So the thickest part of the armour is 300mm, and this is this band here above the mantlet. I believe 300mm goes across the whole of the mantlet on the Tech Tree T110E4, so it's slightly weaker than the T110E4, but this is still quite a strong plate. However, if you can actually hit it with high penetration rounds, you should be able to go through, especially heat rounds. The actual mantlet there and to the left and right is sloped upwards and kind of rounded towards the outer edge. Is 254mm of armour, so very thick indeed. And unless you are kind of hitting the outmost edges, you probably need around 280mm of penetration to go through, and if you're hitting the outer edges, maybe above 300mm of penetration will suffice to go through this section. But if you can hide the hole, this definitely can ricochet some shells. Underneath the gun and around the mantlet, you have this 203mm section, so if you can shoot underneath the gun, you can go through probably with around 220 to 250mm of penetration. And the cupola, 203mm, not fantastic, but it has got a kind of point in the middle, so it can be quite tricky to actually penetrate. Probably if you're shooting up at it or kind of slightly down on it, it's a flatter angle and easier to go through. But again, you probably only need around 230 250mm to be able to go through the cupola. However, against poorer penetration, lower caliber guns, it can be useful. And the sides of the turret, 152mm, and the rear of the turret, 152mm. If you're shooting at the sort of side of the turret and it's angled like this, then you probably will ricochet. However, if you've got a flat shot on the side, it's quite a large profile and easy to penetrate and easy to hit, even for Tier 8s. Next, lower plate of this Czech Tier 8 heavy tank, the TNH 105-1000, is sloped backwards, or sloped upwards I should say, but yeah, 145mm of armour I should say. Not very good, going to be butchered by tanks that you are going to be coming up against, and only really extreme angles like this you're going to be ricocheting some lower caliber, lower penetration rounds. The upper plate, not fantastic, 125mm of armour. Again, some Tier 8s might ricochet at extreme angles, but most Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks will just go straight through this section of your hull, so you want to do everything you can to try and avoid people shooting your hull, and you want to try and side scrape where possible, and also get hull down and use the 6 degrees of gun depression that this tank has. The actual sides of the armour, 80mm of thickness, which means that you can side scrape pretty well in this vehicle. However, when you do side scrape, it means that these yellow sections here above the drive wheels to the left and right, you're able to shoot, and it kind of negates having good side armor. So if this thing's side scraping against you, shoot the yellow section which goes over the tracks there, and you'll be able to go through with a decent amount of penetration, probably only needing around 200mm to guarantee going through there, unless you are at an extreme angle. But yeah, try side scraping. It can actually absorb some rounds, and that's the best thing about this hull, because from the front it's absolutely terrible. Next, you have the roof deck, which is 76mm, which is nice. You're not going to be getting overmatched there. In terms of the rear of the Ruthless, 55mm of armour, so a nice easy penetration there. The back of the turret roof deck, 51mm. So if you're coming up against this tank in a Death Star, you will be able to actually overmatch this section here. You're going to need a 154mm caliber gun or higher to overmatch this section if you have a shot on it. So anything like a Jagdpanzer E100, Sturm Tiger with the heat rounds, or this tank or the Death Star or FE 4005 will be able to overmatch, so definitely watch out for that. In terms of the rest of the armour, it's all kind of non-negotiable. It doesn't make an awful lot of difference. The tracks themselves count as 20mm of spaced armour, and there's 20mm of spaced armour over the rear protecting it, but it's not incredibly thick, but it can protect against some lower caliber HE rounds, and some more spaced armour, 6mm over the front and the rear drive wheels, if I remember how to speak. So that's it for the armor viewer of the Ruthless. You want to do everything you can to side scrape, get hull down with 6 degrees, and use this turret to bounce your opponents. And if you're coming up against this vehicle, if it's side scraping, shoot those flaps that go over the sides of the drive wheels. Try and get the cupola with high penetration rounds, or just shoot the front, sides or rear of this vehicle, and it'll be a nice easy penetration for you. So it's a little bit of a glass cannon when it's not hull down, however the turret is quite useful. So that's it for the armor viewer here of the Ruthless. We're now going to get stuck into the first of the gameplay, so I'll see you over there in just a second. So we're now into the first gameplay of today's video, and we're here in the Ruthless on Redshire in a standard battle, and we've spawned in the south, and we're going to make our way very, very slowly into the centre ridgelines of the map, where hopefully we can blap someone, because by the time we get there we will have reloaded, even though the DPM is horrific. And you can get a nice idea now of just how bloody slow this tank is. It's absolutely infuriating, and it can be very, very annoying if you need to relocate during the battle. So you do have to think very carefully about where you want to go on the battlefield, your positioning, and also whether you have any teammate support. In this particular gameplay we have Petty 360, we also have KB and TCAN on our team. I believe they're doing the official World of Tanks console stream right now, so fortunately we have some competent players on our team, so we can make the most of them. So yeah, we finally got ourselves nearly into position. It's well over a minute into the battle. We haven't been able to fire our gun, and that's kind of what happens in the Ruthless from my experience in my very limited play session today in this vehicle. You spend a lot of time getting into position. Sometimes you get there and your teammates have rushed in and died. Sometimes you get there and people have turned around, and yeah, you've got to either retreat or just stick with the flank that you've chosen. And if you do get caught out with this horrific DPM, yeah, you can get taken out very quickly indeed, because of the armour I showed you in the statistics and the armour review we had a little look at earlier on in today's video. Even with my reload with my commander and equipment setup, it's still 24.07 seconds, so a long time. And the reload on my Death Star or my FE 4005, it's much better, and the gun handling feels just so much better than this vehicle. I can't say I've really enjoyed playing the Ruthless, and this first gameplay is going to be a very typical game that I was having in my session today. It's not going to be anything astronomical. It's just going to be playing a very passive support style gameplay using our teammates' vision. Even though we have boosted up our own vision, your camouflage is so horrific that people will just outspot you. And yeah, we're going to be using our 183mm caliber gun just to put rounds in where we can, and you've really got to let it fully aim in. You've seen that I've had to really fully aim in to get it where I want it to go, the shells that is. And fortunately we have put a shell into the EBR-90, I believe it was, and then one into the tier 10 Chinese tank destroyer at the back of the map. And now we're just sat on this ridgeline. I've come to the lower portion of this ridgeline because the gun depression on the Ruthless is 6 degrees, and it's very, very awkward to use, especially on maps like Redshire where there's massive hills. So you've really got to think about where you're taking your tank. If I was any higher, I'd have to expose a lot more of the Ruthless in order to get my shots off. And I'm just being very passive because the first couple of gameplays I played in this vehicle fully kitted out, I think I did a combined damage of 100 across 2 games, because first one got blacked by a Death Star, set on fire, and then I got taken out subsequently a minute later. And then the second gameplay, I just couldn't get where I needed to go. Unfortunately, that's the story of this tank. It's a little bit infuriating. Of course, it's nice when you hit. Any kind of derp gun or high caliber gun is brilliant when you hit. It's just how often, how consistent it is compared to the other vehicles that you have at your disposal. We get some nice assistance there as the WZ-113 GFT gets taken out by our friendly Ruthless, which means that the view range we boosted up is definitely helping. And if you look to the bottom of the screen, you'll see that I run large med, large repair kit, and combat rations. Combat rations, I think, are a must on this vehicle to improve the reload and the gun handling and the view range, just trying to get something out of this vehicle. It's not going to be a sort of a flawless review in the terms of there's so many Ruthless in the gameplay at the moment, and of course, because it's a new update, people are just going out testing the new tank, so it's not sort of an exact indication of what's going to happen, but I have a good feeling this is going to be a tank with a very poor win rate, and good players will still do relatively well in it, but newer players will definitely struggle because it just does not have the armour that something like a T110E4 has, or a Death Star, and it doesn't have the flexibility and the mobility of something like the FE4005. So there we take out that T54A1, and it's already 5 minutes into the battle, and we've only done 2.4k direct damage, 492 assistance. And yeah, it just feels like you're forever trying to find a target, trying not to overexpose yourself. Sometimes you're umming and ahhing whether you want to poke over a ridge because you almost feel like you're just going to get blapped yourself. And like I just said, it's very difficult at this stage with so many Ruthless in the gameplay. There's still loads of tank destroyers with high alpha. You have to be very careful because the hull on this tank is absolutely horrendous. However, it does look like we're going to win this gameplay here, and like I said, it's just a very indicative gameplay of what was happening when I was playing the Ruthless. I do have the advanced reload, so I can switch between the HESH and the HE, or both HE rounds I should say, but sometimes I just feel like it isn't necessary, and I'd rather have that guaranteed pen with the AP rounds, whereas with a Death Star and FE4005, with the gun handling, slightly better reload, it feels more worth it sometimes to switch out for the premium HE, or HESH in their case, or the regular HE. But we managed there to boost our damage up to 3.6k, 492 assistance, 1 kill, and unfortunately for us, this T92 HMC is going to feed himself to one of our teammates, and that's all she wrote for this first gameplay. And it's nothing special, like I said, it's just something I wanted to include to show you a very standard round. If you're a sort of average player like me and you've had a little bit of experience with various tanks and the different maps, you can probably expect this kind of result relatively consistently. You're going to have those gameplays where you get ammo racked or set on fire, or you get in the wrong position and you're too slow to do anything about it, but more often than not you're going to have a small input. I just don't think it's capable of doing massive carries like some other vehicles are. But that's it for the first gameplay there. We manage a victory here on Redshire. Petty finishes in second place, and that is because he was doing spotting for himself. He's getting more assistance and he had an extra kill, whereas we sort of picked him off a little bit more passive, but we did 3.6 and 492. So that's it for the first gameplay there in Redshire. The next couple of games are slightly better games, or a lot better games in my opinion, and we'll see how the Ruthless gets on in them. So I'll see you over in the second gameplay in just a second. So now you join me 2 minutes into a battle here on Heilbronn. It's a standard battle and we are in the Ruthless in the E8 location. I was considering contesting the sort of E 5 E6 location in the centre of the map, but we don't really have enough gun depression with 6 degrees to contest those ridge lines, and nobody else was contesting there. The city's not really a place for the Ruthless, because if you get caught out there, everyone else is so far away. You don't have artillery support, so we've come up here trying to get some cross shots on enemy tanks that are going down the 9-0 line, or up the 9-0 line I should say, and contesting our base, and we do get a nice shot there into the T1 Teddy 5. And this is how you play the Ruthless. You've got to be quite passive. It's ruthless when it hits, but you definitely don't want to be on the front lines, because if people do get your hull, or they get around you, or you get outnumbered, you are not long for this world and you get taken out of the game very, very quickly indeed. We should be okay here firing on the T58 heavy. He doesn't spot us, but we definitely reverse out of the way as quick as we can because the reload is astronomically long. And yeah, within a couple of shells, we're up to 2.2k damage, and this tank does suit those longer, more drawn-out games. Games like on Prokhorovka or on maps like this, where it's not as easy to kind of rush the base and snowball the effect of the game. So, as you can see here, we're still having issues with our 6 degrees of gun depression. It can be very awkward, and I kind of underestimated it in the statistics part of today's review, just how annoying it is, especially because you are so blooming slow. Your hull traverse isn't great, your turret traverse isn't great, and even though we've improved that with the gun handling skills, improving the turret traverse, and the clutch break-in on the commander, improving the hull traverse, it's still so damn slow. So I'm being very tentative around corners, much less aggressive than I would be in something like a T124, even a Death Star or an FE 4005, and especially something like a Sturm Tiger or a Jagdpanzer E100, because they have the armour to quite often bounce shells, especially from tier 8s and 9s, and even sometimes from tier 10s. So there is this Ruthless here, and I'm hoping to make use of intuition here, fire into the back of the turret. Unfortunately, it derps from that close in. I should have let it aim in further, and we only did splash damage with the Hesh round, or the premium HE I should say. Fortunately, we do have a friendly T124 coming up behind us that is going to put off this Ruthless from turning around and getting us. The artillery only splashes us for a minuscule amount of damage, which means that we can turn around and advance towards the tanks that are in the south of this map. And I hope you're getting a nice indication of the kind of mobility and how the gun handles. It's just all very, very disappointing. I think this is, in my opinion, one of the worst season pass rewards that we have had. I'm not a massive fan of the kind of mercenary tank idea anyway. I think it was originally implemented really poorly. They should have just done a tech tree with tanks that don't deserve their own whole line, but, you know, are actually historically accurate tanks. This is just, yeah, very disappointing. It's not even like it's that good. It's really not that good. There are so many better tanks out there, and I'd rather take a tier 8 than this thing into battle, in my personal opinion, and that's no joke. There are so many tier 8s that are just so much more flexible and so much more enjoyable to play. It's just so slow, the gun handling's so derpy, and you're going to have some good games like you're going to see here and in the next gameplay, which is my best game so far. However, there are more consistent vehicles out there, but people are going to be buying the Ultimate Pass, myself included, so they're going to have this vehicle and you're going to want to try and play it to the best of your ability. And all I can recommend is don't be too aggressive. Try and play in platoons if you can, have support behind you, and just make every shot count, because the DPM's bad. Let it aim in fully. Try and improve the DPM and gun handling as much as possible. I wouldn't worry about improving the mobility too much, using mobility equipment, because it's just not worth it. The advanced reload there, we switched out to the Hesh so we can one-shot that M53, M55 artillery, which is nice. And yeah, that's just what you got to do. Be passive, make the shells count, play a support style gameplay, and just don't get caught out and don't let people have your hull, because yeah, you're going to be taken out of the games very quickly. But that's a victory there on Heilbronn in the Ruthless. 2 kills, 5k direct damage, only a 3rd class, with people obviously playing some exceptional games so far, which is to be expected on release day. 333 assistance, and yeah, that's a 6-minute 24-second game there with a victory. So now we're going to head on into the 3rd and final game of today's video, and it's my best one so far, so I'll see you over there in just a second. So you're joining me in the third and final battle of today's video. We are a minute and a half, or just over a minute and a half, into this battle here on Nomonhan, and the first minute and a half was just us making our way into this location here in B4, where we're going to try and get some shots down the western side of this map. And I've accidentally loaded one of the standard HE rounds. We do miss the mouse anyway, but I thought I still had the AP loaded. I don't know what I was doing, and yeah, we've got to suffer through this horrendous reload again. We get spotted, so we're going to go into the hard cover. Be very wary, artillery are out in force and they will shoot the new tanks that are on the battlefield, so yeah, be warned about that. We're having gun depression problems as usual here in the Ruthless, even though these ridgelines, as you can see, aren't particularly big. You have to sort of weigh up how worth it is to poke sometimes, and unfortunately we're a little bit too late and we wouldn't have penned a mouse at that angle anyway. We try and fire one blind at the E75's turret because we can definitely go through with the AP. Unfortunately we miss, and then it's another reload, which is why I keep saying in the first two gameplays, and I'll say it again, you just want to make every shot count. Aim in as much as you can. Try and make them count because your DPM's horrific and sometimes the game can get away from you. But fortunately for us, this is another longer drawn out game, and that's what suits this tank the most. It won't excel, I don't think, but it's the best kind of chance you have of having those kind of epic games that you want. We've got 645 assistance just by spotting people down here on the west, so it definitely is worth improving your view range, using the combat rations as well. And yeah, you can hopefully spot for yourself. Just be wary, most things are going to be able to outspot you because your still concealment rating is absolutely horrendous. With a full kitted out crew, I think it's 366 meters or something like that, so yeah, you're no sneaky boy by any means. And now I have a chance here to just peek over and we snap a shot into the SU-122 54. Unfortunately, we do take some fire from the back, and it doesn't take very long for this tank to lose half our hit points there, or just under half our hit points, and now we have to be even more careful for the rest of this battle. But fortunately, we did put a nice round there into the SU-122 54, suffering through this horrendous reload again. And now we're going to try and find a different angle on our opponents. And a lot of the battles are spent traversing into position, relocating, reloading. It can be quite boring if you hate long reloads or slow tanks. This just really isn't the one for you. If you want a flavour of this high caliber gun, there are better tanks that you've seen in my review today that are just much more fun, like in the case of the Sturm Tiger, splashing multiple tanks. Or it can be much more competitive in the form of the Jagdpanzer E100 or the Death Star or the FE 4005. We tried and looped a shell into that medium over the ridgeline. Unfortunately, we missed, so again we're having to suffer through this reload. We're getting some assistance, however, and we're going to see if we can poke out side scrape, probably over-angling a bit, but we're going to see if we can finish him off here. Fortunately, as he lurched back, I fired, but he lurched again forwards and went into our shell, meaning we take out that M48A2 120mm. So a bit of good fortune does help this tank out a lot. It's very close on the scores. It's 10 tanks left per side, and now when we reload, we're going to try and come round and get a snapshot into mouse. So unfortunately, they get into cover, Ruthless in the back, so we're going to go over another rock to this hard cover and see if we can surprise these mouse, try and get undetected, and then get them out again. Unfortunately for us, this FE 4002B proxy spots us and we derp our shell anyway. It goes into the tracks, and that's just how bad this gun handling is if you don't let it fully aim in. Remember, we've got all of the gun handling skills. We're using combat rations, 9-skill commander, and unfortunately it's just the way it is. You could definitely take out the advanced reload if you're not worried about switching between your AP and your HE without time penalty. If you just wanted to pick and choose, you could maybe use vents to further improve it, but I don't think it would make an awful lot of difference. However, every little might help to you and your playstyle. This is just a recommendation that I've had from my play session today in the Ruthless. And now I'm just waiting for my moment to come round, aiming in for as long as I feel I can, get a shot there, and we low roll quite significantly on the mouse, which is really disappointing. However, we are getting the shots in, and I'm trying to be a little bit more selective now about when I'm firing the shots. So that heavy on our team down there in C2 looks like he's not long for this world, so we're just going to fall back a ridgeline because I just don't want to be taken out this early. I've had so many bad games to this tank and it's been so frustrating. It's taken me quite a while to actually get, you know, a decent enough gameplay to show you what can happen if you're patient and, you know, if you make the right calls in the game. So we fall back a ridge, and if anyone comes over this ridge line now at us, we can bait them over the top, and hopefully the tank destroyers that are situated in the east can actually support us from their position. Mouse comes and spots us, but we're going to reverse out of the way. Horrendous reverse speed, but just enough that we evade this Centurion cavalry shot there, and we're getting some beautiful assistance from all of these tanks that are chasing us. If they did manage to chase us and there's no support, we'd be a goner. We can only probably get one more shot in this round and that would be it, and we're already one tank behind, and I don't want to give up this game too early. I want to try and get the victory and try and have a good game in the Ruthless. It's probably not a tank that I'm going to be playing much in the future, probably for a while, seeing if my conclusions that I'm going to be coming to at the end of today's video are true, or whether it might feel a little bit better for me on a different day. But FE 4005 there over the ridge line. We've got the Marat coming to join us. We've got some tank destroyer behind us. We're just going to poke around this rock and see if we spot anyone further down this sort of 3 and 4 line on this ridge line. We don't spot anyone, so we're going to try and sort of come up behind the tanks that are situated in the northwest of the map, and hopefully we can get a surprise shot maybe on this VK 4000 4502B or this FE 4005. FE 4005 would be a perfect candidate for one of our HE rounds, and the reason I carry 2 standard HE is because of things like the FE 4005 or 4 artillery if I've got their side and I don't want to spend the extra credits. We switch out there for a regular or a stunt premium hash round, I should say, or premium HE, right through the lower plate of the Ruthless, showing you how bad the hull is on this vehicle, and that actually saved us because the FE 4005 took out that tank just after we hit him. Unfortunately, the VK 4502B is coming after us. We've nearly reloaded. We're going to have one more shell, and we managed to overmatch his side there. Fortunately, that didn't ricochet. And yeah, I was just hoping that the FE 4005 was going to be able to take out this VK 4502B. I think he fired. Hesh didn't penetrate, and that means that the enemy FE 4005 comes over and takes us out. Our FE 4005 is on low health. T110E5's gone the whole way around the map and just decided to cap, as you would, and unfortunately the artillery couldn't put enough firepower, although they did try and give us some nice assistance. This FE 4005, yeah, not long for this world, and it's just a case of waiting for the T110E5 to get eventually taken out, as he probably will do very, very quickly indeed. So I'll give you my final opinions on this vehicle now. I think it's a really disappointing reward. I think it's going to be played extremely poorly by a lot of players. Newer players or players that are new to tier 10 are going to have 1, maybe 2 shots every game, and that's it. If you rush in, you're going to get killed very quickly. Hull armor's trash. Try and stay hull down as much as possible. Make your shells count. You can still have decent games, but there are many more competitive tanks out there. And yeah, again, it's just a very disappointing tank, but we do finish with a fairly decent result there for a tier 10 tank destroyer. 5.3k direct damage, 1.6k assistance, 1 kill. Make a profit with a premium account, but a loss without it, just showing you that you don't even make silver, because obviously there's no silver bonus as a premium. And yeah, just an all-round disappointing tank, but that's the best game I've managed so far in a short play session. That was a 9-minute 43-second battle that allowed us to do that. Let me know what you think of this tank in the comments if you've played it or you're thinking about getting the Ultimate Season Pass, and leave a like on this video if this review has been helpful. I'll be putting out a review as soon as possible on the Bandit, which is the Cold War Independent Alliance Era 2 medium tank. That is the level 100 reward for the Soldiers of Fortune season. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.